I'm an academic at heart. So got my PhD. And when I was in my first program, or first doctoral seminar, you've got all different, the ones who are just getting ready to write their dissertation, and then the newbies like me. So they give out topics, and all the older students get all the sexy topics like advertising and branding and consumer behavior. And so by the time it got down to first year, it was either modeling or sales. And I am not doing modeling. So I said, do sales. All these things. But it matched with my interest in consumer behavior and understanding people. Sales, it's at the heart of it all. And same thing with English. It's people. Okay. It's understanding people. So I did sales. I really fell in love with it, and then came to University of Cincinnati. No one wanted to teach sales, okay, because nobody goes to college to become a salesperson. And I said, I can teach sales, and these are really good jobs for students. So that's how I got into the sales. How I got into women in sales, which a course that I taught for 10 years, okay, for 10 years. And keep in mind, this was 10 years ago. And when it started, sales in a college of business is predominantly male. And so in my sales classes, I'd have 30 men and maybe on a good day, 3 women. And they would all huddle together. They wouldn't say anything. They would get A's because they knew the material. They were very good. And corporations, recruiters, of course, are recruiting from sales classes, and they wanted women. And I could not get women to take a sales class, much less consider sales as a career. So I got a grant. It was from Procter Gamble, a $10,000 higher education innovation grant, and said, let me just try a class, Women in Sales, because I knew women sold differently, and I knew the title would attract women. And it did. It attracted women from all over campus, not just business majors, English majors, French majors, dance students, engineering students. And I taught that course for 10 years, and it taught me a lot about how to get women into sales and how successful women can be. I had done my dissertation on women in relationship selling. Now, keep in mind, this was in the early 90s. Once again, it was business to business selling. There were no women. Yeah. My thesis was, you're building, if big relationship selling was big. Okay, you're building relationships. Maybe you ought to think of hiring women who are very good naturally at building relationships. 1990s, it went nowhere. I could barely get a publication out of it. So when I started teaching the course, I knew women sold differently. And what I was seeing in my other classes was the pushy, stereotypical, obnoxious, beat the customer down. And of course, the women would just shot, like, no. And so I wanted to get that out of the class. And so quite honestly, that was all I knew going in. Women sold differently than men. And I'm going to plug my book. What I learned what turned out to be an entire book. That is how much I learned. I learned that women were afraid of failure. They're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of hearing no. Well, we've got to stop that if you're going to be in sales. So I learned how to do that and how to teach women. So going in, because it was a grant, I had to do pre-test and post-test. Going into the class, in terms of resilience, and this is replicated, all we did was replicated. Men came in at a higher level of resilience than women. Okay, so men, like, I tell them, no problem. They just keep right on going. Women low. By the end of the class, we had closed the gender gap in resilience. It is a teachable skill. My women know how to sell. The other thing we found, women are afraid of failure, okay, which is taking a risk. Oh, I don't, like, I would watch them in role plays, and they would build the relationship, and the buyer would be eating out of their hands, and they would not ask for the close because they didn't want to get told no. It's risky. It's scary. So fear of failure going into the class was high. We reduced it statistically significant so that by the end of the class, they were not afraid of taking a risk. That was the women in sales class. Interestingly, the women, we compared them to the women who were in the traditional sales class with predominantly men, their fear of failure increased.
Interesting.
Not statistically significant, okay, and we never went back to play with that. But what I think happened is that women self-selected into a sales class thinking, and they came with experience. I've sold purses, I've sold shoes. I can do this. They look at that male model and say, I don't want any part of this. And they start to self-doubt. Whereas the women in the women's class, fear of failure, nope, totally done. And then confidence, the women had greater confidence in their ability to sell than the men did by the end of the class. They have to practice failing. Okay. Now, like they have to practice failing 5 times. And I'm using the word failure in a very broad sense. And that is, I said something stupid at a meeting, right? We've all, oh gosh, I said something stupid at me. Now everyone thinks I'm an idiot. Or I didn't speak up. Tried it all. I should have said something. Right. Or I was going to run 5 miles. I only ran 2 miles. So we practice at a B plus. Students, I hate a B plus. A B plus, I should have gotten an A. So that's the failure. Then I give them 7 or 8 resilience strategies. So instead of what happens, the process of failure, what happens when we fail, we usually play the mistake over and over again in our head, like it's going to change. We beat ourselves up. Oh, Jane, that was so stupid. We vow, I am never doing that again. What is it? Harvard Business Review, 40% of women turned down from leadership positions do not apply again. You can't do that. Okay. And the negative tapes that were put in our heads. Okay, Jane, you are stupid, fat, and ugly. And this is just one more example of it. So you go down a spiral really quick when you fail. So I said, no, we're going to rethink that. So one of my favorite strategies, and I give them 8 strategies and they get to play with, it's like going dress shopping. You wear this one for this occasion. I use this strategy for this occasion. This one didn't work for me, but it worked for you. One is failure is an event, not a person. Okay. You know what? You got a B plus. You're still smart. You are kind. You're a good marketing student. You're going to get a good job. You are articulate and you're a good writer. You just didn't do as well on the test as you thought. Okay, move on. And so they have to use their strategy. And then did it work? Did they move on from the failure quickly? It's not, I don't want, what did you learn from the failure? No, I want getting over it and moving on. And so when I first did this, I thought it would take 8 papers to do it. No, 5. It was only 5. After 5, the students, okay, yep, I know which resilience strategy to use, and they get over the failure quickly. If you're not failing, you're not putting yourself out there. I like failure is an event, not a person. Because think about, oh, I'm a failure, right? Oh, I'm a failure. No good. No. Separate the behavior from the person. You made a mistake. You're still a good person. That one, and then also my other favorite one is see failure as courage. And that really comes from Brené Brown's work. The idea, and I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, I applied for the associate dean's position. Now, keep in mind, it would have been a disaster. I'm so glad I didn't get it. But that's hindsight. At the time, I put in my application. I'm an internal candidate. I did not even get an interview. Usually an internal candidate gets a courtesy interview. Yeah. So I'm thinking they are really looking at me like a real loser. And I'm going down oh boy, now everyone thinks I'm an idiot. And what did that? And then I decided, Jane, you're teaching this stuff. Resilient, practice resilience. And it was, you know what? In my letter, I said, we have this problem, this problem, this problem, and this is what I would do to mitigate those problems. And I thought, you know what? Darn it all. I put my application in. Instead of standing around the copy machine complaining about it, at least I did something. Good for me for doing something and for applying. And see failure as courage and pat myself on the back. And yes, and I'm very glad I'm not in administration. How do you build confidence? And it's practice. It's practice. We do the resilience papers 5 times. Elevator, the elevator pitch, whatever, they probably do that 8 times during the class from the beginning of the semester with recruiters that come in. The first time they're scared. By the 8th time, they're laughing and they're having a good time and they're smiling. And the practice builds the confidence. And, but I think they all interplay because if you're not resilient, the first time it doesn't well, and you think, oh, this, and it doesn't. And you know what? It's scary. Well, and then if you're not resilient, you say, well, I'm never doing that again. Yes, you are. So we do it again. And if you're resilient, you say, okay, failure is an event, not a person. I'm going to do it again. Okay. And then each time it gets better and better and better. So that's how I think the getting over that fear of failure, that resilience is the antidote to fear of failure. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. What do? Move on. Boom. Great. Go for it. And then the resilience is what you need in order to build the confidence, because you have to keep doing it.